know when you're ready, and then ask people to be on it.
Cable TV, sorry for the interlude. Are you ready?
They got it.
Hi, Chairman Mendelson. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yes, we are ready, sir.
We'll get through now.
All right, that's exciting.
Thank you.
Oh, is that what happened?
That's me. Yeah.
Oh. No, is that what happened?
All right, let's get started. I'm calling to order this hearing. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the District of Columbia, of the Council of the District of Columbia. I am Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Tuesday, September 27, 2022. Time is 1:41 in the afternoon, and this hearing is being conducted virtually via the Zoom video conference broadcast platform. It is available to the public on the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov, on the chairman's website, www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. It's being broadcast on Council Channel 13, and it's available on the Office of Cable Television website, which is entertainment.dc.gov. The subject of this hearing is PR 814, Sense of the Council on the Stoddard Elementary Edition Resolution of 2022 and addressing overcrowding and enrollment in Ward 3 DCPS schools. Resolution PR 24-814 was introduced by Councilmember Che on June 16th, 2022. The purpose of PR 24-814 is to declare the sense of the council that the District of Columbia Public Schools should ensure that commuting patterns among current Stoddard families are not disrupted with the addition of a new elementary school in the feeder pattern, and that certain neighborhoods currently included in the Stoddard catchment area remain in the Stoddard catchment area. The proposed resolution also seeks agreement that the new facility addition to Stoddard Elementary be built such that an additional story can be added if future enrollment requires it. This proposed resolution is indicative of larger issues that need to be addressed across the ward, namely the overcrowding that remains in many of the Ward 3 schools. This hearing is to receive testimony from the public and government witnesses on PR 24-814, as well as Ward 3 enrollment and strategies to address overcrowding in the Ward 3 DCPS schools. Often when a sense of the council resolution is introduced, it's retained, which means that then the council will proceed at a subsequent meeting to vote on the sense of the council resolution. In this case, the sense of the council resolution was referred to the Committee of the Whole because I thought that it would be useful to have this hearing to not only have a public discussion about the needs for Stoddard, that the resolution, the sense of the council resolution is intended to support, but also to discuss, have a public discussion of the enrollment situation, particularly with regard to, or particularly given that a new elementary school is proposed. I think it's sometimes referred to as the new Foxhall School. And possibly the testimony here will get into talking about the other new school that's being proposed, which is on MacArthur Boulevard, which would be for high school. There's a significant amount of overcrowding in Ward 3 schools. These two new schools are meant to address that. Is that the right strategy? And that's not to suggest that I'm questioning whether there should be those schools, but exactly how are we going to go about expanding capacity and doing so in a way that supports all of our schools, including Stoddard. Let me pause to see if there are any other council members present and also to let witnesses in. All right, so I'm going to call the witnesses. Lois Holland, Lauren Welsh, who's identified as being with the Stoddard Elementary LSAT, Jessica Lynch, Jeremy Joseph, who's listed as chair of the Key School LSAT and vice president of the Hardy PTO, Matthew Fruman, who's listed as a public witness. We know also that he's very involved and is the Democratic nominee for the Ward 3 council seat, but not listed as such on this list. Lisa Mccluskey, who's listed as being with the Stoddard Elementary School LSAT, Valerie Jablow, Dustin Push, Mulin Desai, Eric Goulet, Brian Termeo, who is chair of ANC 3B, Goopy Howie, Maggie McCrone, Nicole Jennings, Hosanne Hackmack, Melody Molinoff, who's with the Ward 3 Education Network, and Lindsay Seltzer. The witness list indicated the testimony would be limited to 4 minutes. You'd be mindful of that. I'm hopeful that you all have submitted your testimony. It makes it much easier for us to follow. We'll begin with Ms. Holland. Good afternoon. My apologies, we're starting this late. We had a hearing that ran longer than we thought. And so in any event, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairperson.
Good afternoon.
I'm with the Georgetown Reservoir Neighborhood Alliance, a neighborhood adjacent to the MacArthur School site and 1 block from the Hardy School. Today, I'm speaking about decision-making. During the time of the Jackson Reed overcrowding debate, I've seen a good deal of distress within many communities. The root cause, I believe, is the decision-making process itself. I think it's flawed. The Chicago Metropolitan Planning Agency stated the following when it overhauled its public school decision-making process. Quote, "The process of determining where to build new schools is influenced by a number of factors, but typically lacks a rigorous planning process, considering a multitude of factors to determine the optimal location for a new public school. In fact, size, footprint, location, accessibility, walkability, etc., often take a back seat to lower costs and the least number of obstacles prior to development," unquote. In DC, we leave this to our hardworking educators and politicians. However, the professionals who should be more involved are urban planners, logistics and population specialists, architects and land use professionals, and even economic developers. What has happened with the Jackson Reed overcrowding problem is future shock. That is, the system finds itself in unnecessary distress, because the problem is moving faster than the solution. I recommend the following. Develop and publish a revised decision-making process for school selection. Require decisions to be data-driven and multidisciplinary. Publish outcomes, including hard data. Hire a non-political decision engineer with authority and accountability, and commit funds to improve DCPS decision-making. Paying to optimize decisions is much more effective than paying to fix mistakes. Any parent of an 8th grader need only visit the MacArthur site today, and I invite them to do so, to consider whether this school promises a full educational experience less than 1 year from today. I urge you to transform the current decision-making approach for the sake of our students and for the health of our school system in the future. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Holland. Lauren Welsh.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, DC Council members, and everyone on this call. My name is Lauren Welsh, and I'm speaking as the chair of the local school advisory team for Stoddard Elementary. I wish to express our strong support for the resolution under consideration today. First, on behalf of Stoddard, I'd like to express our gratitude to Councilmember Che for drafting the resolution. Our community would also like to share our gratitude that Stoddard's renovation budget has been restored in the mayor's 2022 budget, and we really appreciate council support in getting the funding for the Stoddard project restored. We are especially grateful for the restoration of resources essential to addressing the longstanding space constraints through an expansion on site. This is a position that has received broad support from the community and education leaders in the ward. As you know, DCPS is planning to build a new elementary school at Fox Hall, which will, quote, require redrawing a new boundary that reassigns a portion of Key, Man, and Stoddard boundaries, close quote. Including Stoddard in its plan for Fox Hall runs counter to the wishes of the residents of Glover Park and members of the Stoddard community. The DCPS plan also ignores the recommendations of the Fox Hall and MacArthur Working Group convened by DCPS in 2021. In the final CWG report, the Stoddard community clearly conveyed its opposition to having a portion of its boundaries reassigned to Fox Hall. We appreciate the consideration that DCPS has said it will give to the forthcoming citywide boundary study, which we fully support. And just to be clear, we are not seeking for Stoddard to be exempted from the citywide boundary study. We share the concerns of our neighbors across the ward about overcrowding issues at play in Ward 3, which this resolution speaks to. But it's important to note that because of its location, Fox Hall is not a reasonable solution for Stoddard's overcrowding, regardless of what the new data show. For those not familiar with the neighborhood, please allow me to explain why reassigning Stoddard families to Fox Hall is not a reasonable plan. First, while Glover Park is the site and the site of the new Fox Hall school might appear close to one another as a crow flies, Glover Archibald Park and Whitehaven Parkway pose a meaningful geographic barrier between these two areas. There is no direct way to reach Fox Hall from any part of Stoddard's boundaries, either on foot or by vehicle, and there are only 2 routes around the park. As such, if Stoddard families were reassigned, distance would increase substantially and could double or even triple for families. Within the Stoddard boundaries are some of the most densely populated census tracts within Ward 3. And what this means in practicality is that much of Stoddard's enrollment comes from families who live within walking distance to the school. Presently, 70% of Stoddard families walk to school. So reassigning the number of Stoddard families the DCPS has suggested in its plan cannot be done around the margins. This would require a significant redrawing of Stoddard's boundaries. Strikingly, according to DCPS's own data, as presented in the working group, the commute would increase for 100% of the Stoddard students reassigned to Fox Hall. And lastly, reassigning Stoddard to Fox Hall would require that those Stoddard students who are reassigned leapfrog over neighborhoods that are currently assigned to Hyde-Addison, which would isolate those students from their neighbors to the north and the south. As you know, Stoddard is stated to begin a capital improvement project that will increase its permanent capacity to 523 students. However, as the resolution notes, an expansion to 523 will fall far short of addressing Stoddard's long-term enrollment projections and does not allow Stoddard to offer more than one pre-K class, despite our larger size and in-boundary demand. Therefore, it's critical that the addition be built in such a way that it could accommodate an additional floor when the enrollment requires it down the road. And in fact, this is something that DCPS and DGS have already agreed to. However, as the requirement to build the addition in this way was not included in the RFP language, we are grateful for its inclusion in this resolution. Therefore, on behalf of the Stoddard LSAT and the broader community, we respectfully ask the council to vote to pass this resolution. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you. One last thing is that State Board of Ed Representative Ruth Wattenberg is on the call, and she had signed up to testify, but is not on the list. And so I just wanted to alert you that she's there to testify. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe we've admitted her.
Okay,
So I'll call her at the end.
great.
Jessica,
Thank you.
Jessica and Lynch. Miss Lynch, you're muted, so you have to start over.
Sorry, so embarrassing. I want to thank Chairman Mendelson for holding this hearing, and thank you to Councilmember Che for introducing the sense of the council on the Stoddard Elementary Addition Resolution of 2022. I am Jessica Lynch, a Washington, D.C. resident of Glover Park and a current Stoddard parent. Glover Park is a walkable urban community. At the heart of this community is Stoddard. Like many of our neighbors, my husband and I moved to this neighborhood because of Stoddard. The school connects our community in a fundamental way. I urge the council to understand and appreciate how dedicated Glover Park residents are to this special neighborhood and how central Stoddard is to Glover Park. As you know, Stoddard is currently overcrowded and enrollment is projected to continue to grow. The main reason for the overcrowding is density. The housing immediately surrounding the school is a lovely mix of row homes, high-rise apartment buildings, garden-style apartments, and condo buildings. As such, there are a lot of families that live in a 2 to 3 block radius of Stoddard. And because Stoddard is a high-performing school, many in-boundary families enroll their children there. For years, the Glover Park community has asked for an expansion to the Stoddard building to support all of our students. The funding appropriated by the DC Council to build an addition to Stoddard is very much appreciated. DC's investment in Stoddard is well worthwhile, and the extension should be fully funded to meet the current and future needs of the Glover Park community. DCPS has plans for a new elementary school to be built on Foxhole Road Northwest. DCPS maintains that the purpose of this new school is to alleviate overcrowding at Stoddard, Key, and Mann elementary schools. Last year, I participated in several of the DCPS community outreach meetings regarding the school, and I know that DCPS heard many concerns from the Glover Park community about this plan. I am telling you as a parent and resident of Glover Park, the Foxhole School is not a solution for Stoddard families. It is only causing more problems. As the resolution notes, the school building site on Foxhole Road is in an area that is not accessible by walking or public transport from Glover Park. Even commuting with a car would be a challenge. For the Glover Park families who get caught in the catchment area for the new school, this will be an untenable financial and logistical burden. DCPS points to an overall school boundary redistricting plan and tells us not to worry. However, it seems to me that DCPS will have to pull students from Glover Park in order to fill the seats at the new Foxhole School, and so I do remain concerned. This resolution is needed to amplify our voices and ensure that DCPS hears us and does not split apart Glover Park. Stoddard Elementary School is a success story for DC. I urge the council to build on this success by making Stoddard a priority. I urge you to adopt this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. And I don't have a copy of your statement. Have you submitted it?
Not yet. I just finished it, so I can submit it.
All right, please do. Jeremy Joseph.
Good afternoon, Councilman, Chairman, and members of the council. My name is Jeremy Joseph. I've testified before this committee before. I'm a proud parent of 2 DCPS kids, one at Key and one at Hardy, and I serve in various capacities within the DCPS stakeholder community, including on the community working group for the new MacArthur High School, which we're very grateful that you funded, and as the chairperson for Key Elementary. So related to the sense of the council, I support the resolution and Lauren and Jessica's statements, I think it's paramount that the council and the executive listen to and hear the critical on-the-ground perspectives that are easily only overlooked of the parents and these school communities. Stoddard knows what's best for its school, and I applaud the council for helping elevate their voices. Of course, community views must also be considered in the broader context, but in this case, it seems that promoting walkable elementary schools without having to transect the difficult-to-cross park and a thoughtful construction project that creates future optionality on a fast-growing corridor like Wisconsin Avenue seems totally sensible. My testimony seeks to talk about other on-the-ground perspectives as it affects Key Elementary. Opening of Foxhall will affect Key substantially, and it may take up to 20 to 30% of its enrollment from Key. My testimony is entirely neutral to the Foxhall School as a concept and proceeds under the assumption that it will open as forecast, assuming the data supports that outcome. Smaller schools in the DCPS system are more expensive to run well and effectively than big schools. But this fact is not compensated in the inscrutable DCPS budget model. The small school problem will impact both Key and the new Foxhall School, both of which will be, less than probably 300 students once they're fully up and running. There's a few factors that will cause, that are part of the DCPS budget model that will cause potentially severe financial hardship to Key in the coming years. And this will only be exacerbated with the opening of the Foxhall School. The DCPS budget model today, and increasingly, disadvantages smaller elementary schools in a few different ways. First, according to analysis done last year by the Ward 3 EdNet, DCPS's new budget categorically shifts funding away from elementary schools citywide to the tune of about 6%. And this is excluding counting of those one-time stability funds. The loss of the so-called one-time funds, Key is expected to lose 14% of its funding in 5 or 6% increments over time, which doesn't really speak either to the loss of funding that's being caused by the runaway inflation that we're dealing with now, as dollars just don't go as far as they used to. And this assumes no loss of enrollment. Key's enrollment continues to climb, and yet it's going to be faced with budget cuts, severe budget cuts in the coming years, notwithstanding the budget cuts that'll come with lost enrollment from Foxhall. And funding decreases under the DCPS budget model appear to be fall disproportionately greater than in declining school enrollment. So I'll summarize that the Key administration has created a great, robust package of interventionists and coaches, more than it's provided for under the standard DCPS budget framework. And that's a success story and promotes positive outcomes for all the students. Kids that are falling behind have a huge amount of support, far more than they would in a typical school under a typical budget model to advance. And these funding cuts that are going to be coming, and with the advent of Foxhall, will disproportionately affect Key. I have some recommendations in my testimony as to what the council should do. But the most important thing is the council should ensure that DCPS engages with the Key community to determine what is the appropriate level of funding to run a successful school as Foxhall comes online. The last point I'll make is there is no access by bus. There's minimal access by bus to the new MacArthur High School. And I have some recommendations in my testimony that the council should appropriate funding for additional bus lines and work with the city government, the executive, to make sure that those bus lines are operationalized. And I'm happy to answer additional questions related to MacArthur High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Matt Fruman.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and thanks for having this hearing. Addressing overcrowding in Ward 3 schools is a critical priority for the ward and the city. As we increase capacity, we must be mindful to place it where it can best serve natural communities. An early place this question comes up is the planned addition for Stoddard Elementary in Glover Park. As you've heard, there had been talk of taking a significant portion of Stoddard's boundary blocks from the school and moving it into the boundary for the planned Foxhall Elementary School on the other side of Glover Archibald Park. I've been around this merry-go-round before. 10 years ago, over the objection of many in the Stoddard community at the time, while serving on the Student Assignment Committee, I supported taking areas in Burleith out of the Stoddard boundary, and after the completion of the Hyde Addison modernization, moving them into that school, precisely because those neighborhoods were on the same side of Clever Archibald Park. The same side of Clever Archibald Park as Hyde Addison. The same logic that supported that decision, which was the right decision to reassign a portion of the Stoddard boundary then, applies with even greater force to keeping Clever Archibald Park as the boundary for Stoddard now. That means building Stoddard an addition that can fully serve its natural community. Stoddard's enrollment today is 450, but with 4 kindergarten classes, it has 1 pre-K4. If it fully served pre-K4, that would add 62 students, taking it to 510. DCPS likes to have at least 10% capacity for excess capacity for elementary schools, which would point to a building capacity of 561. Meanwhile, in recent years, Russian and Chinese diplomats have taken their children out of Stoddard and on the order of somewhere between 30 and 50 students, but there's every possibility they'll return. Now you're at 605. And then there's pre-K3. We owe it to every school community to provide pre-K3. Stoddard's needed capacity is well into the 600s. It's possible that there will be other Stoddard changes. There's every reason to believe that Stoddard will need far more capacity than the 523 currently proposed. Indeed, the 554 that had previously been the number proposed was at least more realistic. Whether the ultimate interim target is 523 or 524, 54 or some higher number, it is imperative that the addition be built in a way that fully anticipates the need for considerably greater capacity in the future, and maybe soon, which is the crux of the resolution. I urge you to support that goal through the resolution and in consideration of the capital budget going forward. It should be noted that at 550 or even into the 600s, while Stoddard would be a big school, it would be significantly smaller than a number of successful schools that fully serve their communities. Glover Park deserves no less. I am going to have to join a different thing at 2:45, so if there are questions, I won't witnesses and then do questions. I apologize. I probably won't be able to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fruman. Lisa Mccluskey. Is Ms. Mccluskey here? Lisa Mccluskey. I don't see her. We can always come back. Valerie Jablo.
Thank you. I am Valerie Jablo, and as a DCPS parent for the last 17 years, I appreciate any hearing to address the more than $100 million to expand Ward 3 schools. This investment is fiscally disastrous, and this resolution in DCPS's testimony promulgate misinformation about it. For one, DC's births and kindergarten enrollment have decreased since 2016, while the number of elementary students in the Jackson Reed feeder schools have decreased in the last 3 years. The resolution bases its analysis on inaccurate 2016 population projections, where the low estimate was tens of thousands higher than the actual census. For another, Stoddard's enrollment has historically been below its current total capacity, even with 84% inbounds enrollment. DCPS's proposed increase in Stoddard's capacity is well above its enrollment last year and likely any future enrollment, given the decrease in students and births citywide. Because the entire Jackson Reed feeder shed mirrors that, means that no additional capacity in Ward 3 is warranted. For instance, in school year 21-22, no school had 100% enrollment from only inbound students. The highest was at Janney, 93%, with a low 30% at Hyde Addison. Jackson Reed itself enrolled over 37% of its students out of boundary. In fact, Jackson Reed's 766 out-of-bounds students that year constituted more than the total enrollment of all but 3 DCPS high schools and 1 charter high school, while Jackson Reed feeder elementaries had 1,243 students from out of bounds several elementaries worth. But only 2 schools, Jackson Reed and Oyster Adams, exceeded 100% of their capacity in school year 21-22. Looking at just in boundary students, only 1 school, Lafayette, exceeded 85% of capacity, the nominal definition of fully utilized. Thus, any overcrowding in Ward 3 schools, however defined, is not due to inbound students. Yet Chancellor Farabee testified to this body that expanding capacity in Ward 3 in lieu of redoing boundaries, feeders, and out-of-bounds slots for $0 was to ensure diversity. So let us consider some prices of this plan. Right now, some neighborhoods in DC have no School of Right due to closures. What do you think will happen now by increasing capacity with a not growing student population, 35,000 unfilled seats, and a charter growth ceiling of infinity? The DME has data to support closures outside of Ward 3. The resolution expresses concern for inbound students commuting to a new Foxhall school, yet shows no concern for horrible commutes caused by school closures. River Terrace students, for instance, have to walk 25 minutes one way across and along an 8-lane high-speed commuter road to get to their School of Right. The resolution expresses concern for course limitations at Jackson Reed as a result of space constraints, without noting that few DCPS high schools offer all the foreign languages and math classes that Jackson Reed offers. Perhaps the decoupling here of demographic facts, fiscal sense, and equity issues arises from a belief that Ward 3 schools should not be denied to those outside Ward 3, or that this is a way to strengthen DCPS. If that's indeed true, then why are we not expanding Ward 3 schools to accommodate all DC students? The unspoken reality of this plan is that it was construed as a benefit to Ward 3. Or if diversity is the goal in a city with notably not diverse schools, why not randomly assign, then bus the numerically smallest demographic group, white students? If these proposals are distasteful to you, you just identified the problem. Right now, DCPS schools outside Ward 3 face severe problems that truly deny opportunity, including programming cuts, delayed modernizations, and enrollment loss and closures. That $100 million being spent to increase capacity needlessly could be deployed outside Ward 3 to renovate schools, stop proliferation, support and increase programming, ensure diversity, and decrease dangerous commutes. You can change the course of this right now. Really, it just takes courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diablo. Dustin Push.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Council and Committee of the Whole. My name is Dustin Push, and my wife, Lindsay Stelzer, and I moved to W Street in Glover Park in 2019. It is our understanding that our home and our neighbors' homes would fall within the proposed boundary for rezoning that would move our children from Stoddard to the new Foxhall Elementary School. We provided our written statement, so I'll be brief and limit my testimony to the division and splintering of the Glover Park community that we believe the proposed boundaries would cause. A huge part of why we purchased a home in Glover Park was the promise of sending our then 1-year-old son to Stoddard. Having now lived in Glover Park for 3 years, and as we await the birth of our second child in December, we've seen firsthand how our friends and neighbors' children have thrived academically, socially, and emotionally at Stoddard. To be honest, we've struggled mightily with the idea that the chosen solution to the very real issues that we appreciate would be to divide a neighborhood inside such a clear natural boundary as the Glover Archibald Park. Quite frankly, it's really hard to find a more obvious natural boundary and clear, obvious choice of a boundary in the DCPS. That's been a real struggle that we have just not quite understood throughout this entire process, and we've been involved throughout the entire process. Stoddard is more than an elementary school. It serves as a home base for countless other essential services and programs, a hub for youth sports in the community, and a touchstone for former students and their families as they move through middle and high school. As we work to grow and expand access to such spaces for every child and family across the city, we really hope and trust that there is a way to draw boundaries for Stoddard that do not sharply divide a community and would create the circumstance where one student and one child whose friend across the street was attending a different school. We really thank you for your time and consideration, and we put our faith in the council and the committee to resolve this matter in a fair and equitable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Push.
Chairman, I would just like to quickly add that is our shared testimony. I'm Lindsay Seltzer. I'm listed at the end, and I will not probably be on at the end. So if you want to repurpose that time, you are welcome to. And I appreciate you hearing us together.
Yes, and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mullen Desai.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson. My name is Mullen Desai. I'm a parent of two current Stoddard students, a first grader and a third grader, and the parent of a 3-year-old who we hope will begin at Stoddard in fall 2023. I'm a member of the Stoddard PTO advocacy team. I encourage the council to pass this resolution for 3 reasons. First, the text of this resolution and the principles behind it are in the mainstream of Ward 3 educational policy discussions. Consider a June 16, 2021 Ward 3 EdNet letter to the council, mayor, deputy mayor for education, and chancellor. A letter which was signed by the 3 co-chairs of Ward 3 EdNet, or Ward 3 State Board of Education representative from Key, a representative from Mann, and a representative from Stoddard. The letter reads, in part, we support the Stoddard Elementary School community's desire to meet its enrollment needs on site. We urge DCPS to fully explore the possibility of an expansion of Stoddard Elementary School that would fully accommodate the school's enrollment projections. Second, as this hearing focuses on long-term growth in Ward 3, meeting the needs of Stoddard is meeting the needs of broader Ward 3. ANC 3B, which includes Glover Park and Stoddard, is the fastest growing ANC in Ward 3, experiencing a 12% increase in population between 2010 and 2020. And importantly, 12% is double what the population growth rate was in the previous decade, 6%. The attractiveness of Stoddard and the availability of more housing, particularly multifamily housing, are accelerating our growth. Right-sizing Stoddard is smart policy. Third, you need not wonder how parents feel about this. In May, a petition supporting the principles in this resolution was circulated. Within 10 days, 500 plus Glover Park residents have signed it. In 2021, a letter urging DCPS officials to not divide our community was written by a Glover Park mother of a future Stoddard student. I appreciate Dustin speaking as a future Stoddard parent. Within days, 80 plus Glover Park parents of future Stoddard students had signed it. And consider the results of the Ward 3 Democratic primary in June. In an election in which there were 9 candidates on the ballot, the candidate who was the most outspoken in his support for the principles in this resolution, Matt Fruman. And Matt, thank you again for your comments today. When 50.4% of the votes in Glover Park, precinct 11. In fact, Glover Park is one of only 3 precincts in which Matt exceeded 50%, and only one of only 5 precincts in which Matt's vote total was greater than 600. As a note on this, I just want to add that, I heard from a parent that Matt continues his outreach to the Glover Park community. He was out canvassing a few days ago. It's not unnoticed. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, Chairman Mendelson. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. Eric Goulet.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and council staff. My name is Eric Goulet, DC resident and candidate for the Ward 3 seat on the DC State Board of Education. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's public hearing and allowing me to provide testimony on PR 24-814, the sense of the council on the Stoddard Elementary School Edition Resolution of 2022, and the issue of addressing overcrowding in Ward 3 DCPS schools. I would like to begin by commending Councilmember Che for introducing this important sense of the council resolution and for your leadership, Mr. Chairman, on holding today's hearing. When I ran for the Ward 3 council seat, the issue of school overcrowding was mentioned frequently as a top concern in Ward 3, second only to the public safety concerns of residents. While many schools throughout DC remain under-enrolled, school overcrowding is a unique challenge here in Ward 3. Ward 3 school overcrowding has increased class sizes, particularly at the junior high and high school level. Overcrowded classrooms adversely impact both students and teachers by reducing individual attention for each student and contributing to teacher burnout and retention challenges. School overcrowding has prevented Ward 3 from experiencing the full benefit of universal pre-kindergarten. Due to school overcrowding, Ward 3 elementary schools have no pre-K3 for 3-year-olds anywhere in the ward. And in some schools, pre-K4 is available only through a lottery system. To put this in perspective, only 2 by right neighborhood elementary schools in the entire city outside of Ward 3 do not have pre-K3. And those are Ross Elementary School in Ward 2 and Lafayette Elementary School in Ward 4. Through proper planning and new school construction, we must make pre-K3 available for all Ward 3 families. I would like to commend you, Mr. Chairman, for adding $850,000 to the fiscal year 23 budget for an attendance zone boundary study. We have the opportunity to address the issue of Ward 3 school overcrowding through this study if we make feeder pattern decisions based upon the data, build for projected population growth, and reflect the need for additional or expanded Ward 3 schools in the district's capital budget. During the 2014 to 2015 boundary study, all of the data projections predicted the overcapacity at Deal and Jackson Reed. The initial study recommended that the district either make Shepherd and Bancroft feeders for Wells and McFarland instead of Deal, that Ward 3 elementary schools stop filling empty classroom slots with out-of-boundary placements, or that the district build needed new middle and high school capacity here in Ward 3. District leadership chose to do none of the proposed solutions, and thus the overcrowding at Deal and Jackson Reed worsened exactly how it was predicted in 2014. We cannot choose to ignore Ward 3 school overcrowding data again, which will require district leaders to make hard choices through the boundary study. The study also gives the district the opportunity to identify schools that need additional modernization funding. One clear example of where this is needed is Stoddard Elementary. I have spoken with many Stoddard families who are extremely concerned about the district's proposal to split the Stoddard school community. Glover Park is the epitome of a livable, walkable community. Many residents spoke to me about how they moved to Glover Park specifically so they didn't need a car. They could walk their children to Stoddard and then take a bus or bike to work. Splitting up the cohesive Stoddard community to shift a portion of the students across Glover Archbold Park to the non-walkable proposed new Foxhall Elementary School does not make sense. I believe that rather than simply build structural capacity to add another floor to Stoddard later, the district should add the additional story to the budget of the current modernization. Adding this story now will be more cost-effective than coming back and building it later. It will eliminate the need to split the Glover Park school community, and it will accommodate projected growth in the neighborhood. And if any additional classroom space still exists on this additional floor, then it can be used for swing space for Ward 3 pre-K3 classrooms until pre-K3 capacity can be built out at all Ward 3 elementary schools. That concludes my oral testimony, and I am happy to answer any questions that you or your colleagues have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goulet. Brian Termale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brian Termale, and I am the chairman of ANC 3B, which represents both Glover Park and Cathedral Heights. Stoddard Elementary School is the in-boundary elementary school for a majority of our commission area. It's a vital part of our community, and it's an institution that really gives a sense of place to our neighborhood, and something that every morning, if you were in our neighborhood when being at school, you would see families walking their children from all over the neighborhood to Stoddard. Unfortunately, some of DCPS's initial proposals for establishing the boundaries for their proposed new Foxhall Elementary School would reassign a substantial number of families living within the current Stoddard boundaries in the ANC 3B area to the Foxhall School, which is over 1.5 miles away, even though they live within short walking distance of Stoddard Elementary School. Reassigning so many families to the Foxhall School would go against DCPS's stated policy that they seek to minimize disruptions to families and to allow students to go to the DCPS school that is closest to their homes. The distance, and as other panelists have noted, the lack of direct Metrobus access to the Foxhall School would mean that impacted Stoddard families would likely be forced to drive to the new school, which would be in contradiction of the district's stated both transportation and environmental goals. We'd have more people taking single-family trips over 1.5 miles away in an already congested area. There is ample space available to completely address overcrowding at Stoddard Elementary School by expanding the school on its current site. And RANC and Councilmember Che and the Ward 3 Board of Education member Ruth Wattenberg, who I believe will speak later, all have been supporting that option if when increasing enrollment requires expanded capacity. Our ANC strongly believes that no family assigned to the school should have a longer commute to school than they would if remaining in bounds for the current school. We believe that the Foxhall School cannot accommodate Glover Park families or other families within Stoddard's current boundaries, as the school is not reasonably accessible, and that building the currently funded Stoddard addition should be done in a way that a third story can be added to the building when future enrollment required. Our entire commission voted unanimously to urge the council to pass Councilmember Che's sense of the council resolution, and I'd like to urge you to do that. And then if I could just take a personal prerogative beyond what our commission voted, I will say that of all the issues that have come up facing Glover Park and Cathedral Heights, as a commissioner in my 8 years as a commissioner, I've never seen an issue that so worried or frightened community members, even those who don't have students at Stoddard, than the notion of splitting up our community geographically and sending a portion of it to another school. It's just hard to articulate just how much the Stoddard community really gives our broader Glover Park community that sense of neighborhood, that sense of common unity. And so we urge you to support the resolution, please. I'll give you 18 seconds back.
Thank you, Commissioner. Goopy Howie. Is Mr. Howie here? I don't see him. Maggie McCrone, is she here?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. I do need to submit my testimony, so I will do that right after this. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important matter to our Glover Park community and our children. I am a parent of a current first grader at Stoddard Elementary School and a 3-year-old and hopefully a future Stoddard student. We moved to this neighborhood in 2018, mainly due to the amazing neighborhood and tight-knit community and the proximity to Glover Archibald Park, as well as downtown and the strong community school in Stoddard Elementary. So rather than move to areas that offered more opportunities for pre-K 3 and 4, we opted to come to Glover Park, realizing we would have to pay for private pre-K, but we would have access to a successful neighborhood school starting in kindergarten. We currently live at the southern end of the neighborhood in a portion that's been proposed as part of the reassignment. I know none of that has been finalized, but we are also across from the Glover Park trails. So I'm very familiar with the boundaries that those areas or the park presents. My family's also avid bikers. We enjoy being able to commute around the neighborhood with our bike and our children in tow to avoid using our family car. So I'm also very familiar with the current state of bike lanes and safety issues that biking presents. So indeed, given Glover Park's limited public transportation, biking has become a very reliable way for our family to get around. So I can say with full confidence that if my area of the neighborhood was reassigned, every family would have to drive to the Foxhall Elementary location. I have biked with my children in a trailer behind my bike to Hardy Playground in the Palisades numerous times for events and soccer practices. And even with my electric bike, I feel very unsafe on Reservoir Road during low traffic periods on the weekend. So that's due to the parking taking up one of the lanes and just the heavy traffic that Georgetown Hospital creates. This sidewalk is also very narrow and taken up by pedestrians, so it is not a safe alternative. In fact, I've begun driving to that park rather than biking. So considering the planned addition of MacArthur High School, this issue will not improve, but it will only get worse. My daughter has blossomed at Stoddard Elementary since joining after private pre-K. She has met new friends in the neighborhood that live close to our home. She has joined the Daisy Troop of Girl Scouts, attends many birthday parties and events at the elementary school, which truly serves as a hub for our neighborhood. We live very close proximity to Hyde-Addison as well, and that boundary. My son, who's 3, has several friends who are zoned for that elementary school because they live just a few blocks away in Burleigh. So jumping their boundary for a car commute past Hyde Addison down Reservoir Road to Foxhall seems unduly burdensome and unnecessary when Stoddard families are simply asking for capacity and funding to keep our beloved neighborhood school whole. My daughter rides her bike to school or walks every day, and every day we see and greet friends along the way and enjoy what we've dubbed Glover Park rush hour, which is simply the crowded sidewalks as you approach the school. When my husband is traveling for work, I know trusted neighbors that she can walk with if need be, and simply none of this is possible should we be reassigned to Foxhall. It would fundamentally alter the Glover Park community. So I thank you, Chairman Mendelson, for the opportunity to speak on this, and Councilwoman Shea for introducing this resolution, and to the parents, Stoddard parents, and community members who have championed our school and neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCrone. And I appreciate that you will send your written statement. Nicole Jennings. Is Nicole Jennings here? I do see that Mr. Howie is here. Why don't you proceed?
Sorry, hold on. I'm not a Mr., I'm a Mrs.
I apologize.
That's okay. So good afternoon. My name is Goopy Howie. I'm a mom to a 3rd and 4th grader at Studdard. Clover Park is unique for several reasons. One, it is a high density population neighborhood with a mix of row homes, condos, and high-rise apartment buildings in a relatively small area. Another unique feature of Clover Park is its natural boundary to the south and west by Glover Archibald Park. The proposed Foxhall School is not a reasonable alternative to address the overcrowding at Stoddard. The council approved reallocating funding for Stoddard's addition. This funding allows for Stoddard's permanent capacity to increase from 339 students to 523. As of February 2020, we already reached an enrollment of 505 students. So the current addition plan is only adding 18 more seats to Stoddard. Any addition to Stoddard should be constructed in a way that anticipates the inevitable need for greater capacity in the future. The best solution to overcrowding at Stoddard is to increase capacity. Respectfully, me.
Thank you, Ms. Howie. And again, I apologize.
It's okay. It was my fault too.
I think it was my fault. And I called Miss Jennings, and I don't believe she's here. Ozan Kakmak. Is Ozan Kakmak here? Do not see. Melody Malinoff. I believe Ms. Malinoff is not here, but we have her statement. Ruth Wattenberg. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and for paying attention to the Jackson Reed area overcrowding issues over a good period of time. And many, many thanks to Chairman, Councilmember Shea for raising these issues constantly in recent years. Today's discussion is about the addition to Stoddard and implicitly about what the enrollment Stoddard should plan for. The current DCPS proposal calls for an addition to basically replace the existing trailers, leaving the school with a capacity of 523. This is inadequate. 4 points. First, Stoddard should be built with an understanding that it will enroll well more than 523 students. Ideally, it should be built for at least 550 with a structure that allows easy enlargement to 600 plus. Pre-pandemic, Stoddard enrolled 494 students, had been steadily gaining, and was projected to enroll over 600 students by 2028-29. It's currently way down. We don't know when or to what extent school enrollments will completely bounce back, though based on everything I know, I expect it to. What we do know, and others have named this, is that even today, Stoddard has just one pre-K4 class with a long wait list. As with all Ward 3 schools, DCPS offers no PK3, but I gather there may be growing energy to rectify this. If you offered 2 each of PK3 and pre-K4, you'd immediately have a current enrollment, even before any enrollment pop back, of about 500. You'd only have room for 16 extra students, even
knowing that we know this even before the addition is built. Elsewhere, DCPS now says it plans to build every new school in addition so that projected enrollment is just 80% of capacity, so they won't quickly overcrowd. Stoddard shouldn't be excluded from that planning strategy, and currently it is. At least let's build the addition so a third floor can be built when needed. DCPS says that that's their plan, but the commitment was left out of the budget document. Minimally, let's get that written commitment. Point 2, Stoddard is fully capable of being built for more than 523. Inexplicably, DCPS seems committed to keeping Stoddard small. The reasons have shifted multiple times. At one meeting, I heard that the trees were old, so they couldn't be touched. I was later told the problem was just one tree that was very old, not the big lot with lots of trees, but I'm not sure. Another time it was about an agreement with the rec center, which theoretically you can renegotiate. Another time it was about where the underground heat pumps were. But let's be clear, the Stoddard campus is huge. It's the largest elementary campus in Ward 3. I brought over an architect. Understanding that he doesn't know all the details and surprises that could be underground, he came up with multiple options for where an adequately sized addition could be built. It seems that for some reason, DCPS is just not being candid about the capacity to build on that property. Point 3, no plan should assume that many Stoddard students can easily move to Man. There's an idea around that you can substantially lower Stoddard's enrollment by moving the Stoddard students who live closest to Man. You could move a few, but overall, this idea does not hold water. The border between the two schools is mainly large apartment buildings. I have personally surveyed them. Many of the buildings have exactly 0 school-aged children. A few have several. You have to get closer to Stoddard and further from Man, such that the walk basically doubles or more before you hit a couple of buildings that have more than 10 school-aged students. There just isn't a quantity of students who can easily move to Man. Point 4, no students from Stoddard should be sent to the new Foxhall School, as you have heard. DCPS has inexplicably left on the table the idea of moving some students from Stoddard to the new Foxhall. That idea was in written documents last spring, and I don't think anyone has yet ruled it out. It's nuts. It would double, even triple the commute for even the closest families, adding at least half a mile to the commute. It would turn families from walkers to drivers during rush hour, exactly what we're trying not to do. But DCPS won't take the idea off the table. It's making families nervous. It makes absolutely no sense. Please, DCPS needs to say students won't be pulled from Stoddard to Foxhall. And I just want to say, I know I'm a few seconds over. I don't agree with everything that Valerie Jablow said, but I do want to acknowledge that the current facilities planning approach that DC has is leaving schools across the city devastated. The neighborhood schools are closing down in a lot of places. And among the things that we should be talking about is how important it is that we have MacArthur, but it can't be at the huge level that DCPS was once proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wattenberg. You will give us a copy of your statement, please?
Yes, yes.
That would be wonderful. Could you tell me, Ms. Wattenberg, the enrollment? I think I heard you say that Stoddard's enrollment is down.
Well, it's down from the pandemic, right? Everybody's enrollment is down from the pandemic, except I should say not Hardy and not Wilson. But otherwise, almost every school in the city is down, and so is Stoddard. But there's every reason to think it's going to shoot back up.
Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I thought I heard testimony that it was close to 500 right now.
Before the pandemic. Somebody can get on and say I've got this wrong, but I think I'm correct in saying that.
Chairman Mendelson, I testified that it's 450. But that's with one kindergarten, and 4 kindergartens and 1 pre-K 4. So very easily could be 500 if it had appropriate pre-K 4, let alone the other issues that are out there, pre-K 3, the return of the Russian and Chinese diplomats' families.
Yes, your testimony, Mr. Fruman, showed how the enrollment could actually be over 600.
It's true.
But right now it is, you're saying 450?
That's right. That's the last number I've.
And that is less than it was a few years ago, but that's, Ms. Wattenberg, you're saying that's because of the pandemic.
Yes, it had been going up, I think, in every year since then pretty steadily. And it was well over, it was well over 100% capacity.
I was going to ask somebody about the idea of not students going to Foxhall from Stoddard, but students going to Man. And I think you made the point, Ms. Wattenberg, that theoretically that is possible, but there aren't very many students until you get closer to Stoddard. I'm remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible in the sense that, you could do that, but it makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. You would have to dig deep in, go very close to Stoddard and start pulling kids who were much closer to Stoddard and sending them to Man. And there's just no reason for it. There's no reason for it.
Yes. So then I hesitate to ask this question, but this hearing is not just about Stoddard, but about enrollment. So then where does the new Foxhall School get its enrollment?
So look, I think that with the pandemic Foxhole has, I think it's a 3-year horizon before the digging really starts. And I think during that time, we really need to see what happens with the pandemic enrollment. I would expect it to shoot back up to where it was. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. And insofar as that's the case, you would need extra space for Man and for Key. I have always thought that it should be much smaller than 500. I think it should probably be more like a 300-person school. And it could easily be a 300-person school once enrollment is back.
Mr. Goulet, you turned on your camera. Does that mean you were going to say something, offer something?
I just wanted to turn it on. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share your concerns regarding the Foxhall School. There is concern about, whether that school can support that number of students. And one thing I've talked about is looking through the boundary study to see whether or not the existing GDS site would make sense there to do pre-K 3, potentially through 8, to alleviate the stress in the middle school, and to look at all of our options over the year that you've provided us by giving us a delay on those projects, which is really prudent because it allows us to look for other sites for high school. I think we've missed the opportunity to look at the Wardman, but the Whittle School would be an excellent site to examine for a junior high or high school site. It's currently owned by the feds. The Whittle School had reduced its footprint substantially in bankruptcy. And I think there's an opportunity to look holistically through the boundary study to look at what all the options are in the ward, including to look at opportunities in Friendship Heights too, not probably for a high school, but for additional elementary school capacity there. So I think this is an opportunity to keep all options on the table, but I share those concerns that Ruth Wattenberg mentioned about the Foxhall School being able to support that number of students that's being projected.
Thank you. I had a question for Mr. Trammell. I have a letter from you to Councilmember Clay dated May 23rd. Is that the ANC resolution? Or do you have something more?
We've had a number of actions on this issue. Like I mentioned before, it's one that is got a lot of our community worried. We actually passed a resolution at our most recent meeting, which was the 8th of September. That should have been submitted. If not, I'll check with Commissioner Mladenoff, who's our secretary, just make sure we got it into you guys.
So who would have sent it?
Commissioner Mladenoff, our secretary.
Okay.
Yeah. If not, I can send you a copy. I've got one on my computer.
Please do that.
Sure.
Because it would be great to have that.
Yes. And again, the vote was unanimous.
Okay.
I would just add on the enrollment question, if I may, since I got the camera on.
Yes.
I failed to note in my testimony that Mrs. Trammell, my wife, is a 4th grade teacher at Stoddard. I'd say that the decline in enrollment, a lot of it comes from the removal of the diplomatic children. The Russian embassy pulled out all students en masse in January of this year, ostensibly for COVID, but I think about a month and a half later, it became obvious why they pulled the students out. And we're actually, even this year, beginning to see some of the Russian students come back in. I think that anecdotally, they really value an English language education that they don't get at the Russian school on campus. I don't know about the Chinese diplomats coming back. They've reshuffled some of their diplomatic population out of Glover Park. So but that's a big chunk of the equation for us. And I will say, I understand that there's some enrollment numbers that get posted in the chat. My wife teaches in what DCPS terms a demountable, which I think the rest of the world would call a trailer. There is no extra space at Stoddard. Their identified COVID quarantine space was kind of like out of Harry Potter, literally the cupboard under the stairs. So, and they were doing special education pull-out instruction in teachers' closets. So space is extremely tight there. Sorry, that was the longer answer than you asked for, Chair.
No, that's okay. I want to ask somebody, I'm not sure who to ask. This was in Miss Welsh's testimony. The requirement to build an addition so as to structurally support an additional floor was not included in the language for the request for proposals for Stoddard's renovation. Can anybody speak to that?
I think Lauren's probably.
Yeah, that's correct. I included that. So I had engaged with DCPS and DGS on this issue, and we had been told that it would be included in the request for proposal for the Stoddard addition. However, it was not. They said that they would issue a revision to the RFP, and it managed to close without that revision happening. However, they communicated with us that it was their every intent that they would build it to accommodate an additional floor, and send us an email from DGS to affirm that. But obviously it would be meaningful to us to have that from the council in this resolution, so that we can have sort of the council elevate that and the importance of that issue of being smart about our building and building for the future.
Yeah, well, I expected the resolution is going to go forward, but the resolution doesn't do the trick. And I don't want to sound critical, but we actually put the language, or it was my intent that we put the language in the project description in the capital improvement plan. And that should be binding on the executive.
I would have to double check the SIP for that, but I know that they had committed to it being in the RFP and that it was accidentally omitted.
Okay. Well, that's troubling. And as I said, the sense of the council resolution is not binding. And so it can make us feel good. I don't mean to be putting it down because it has some value, but it's not binding on them. And I would take the view that the capital improvement plan, the budget documents is binding. I don't have that in front of me. But so clearly that'll require some more vigilance, if you will. I had one other thing, and then I was going to turn to the executive witnesses. There was some testimony, I'm really thinking Mr. Joseph in his statement talking about the DCPS budget model. I don't put a whole lot of stock in the budget model. For one thing, the budget model is not a model that's adopted by regulation. It's a sort of a, I'm going to say, a secret sauce that exists in central administration. And so whatever they say it'll do this year, it could be different next year or the year after, because none of it is set in regulation. But in fact, the model was rolled out earlier this year, as I think you all know, with a lot of fanfare beginning last December about how it promoted equity, stability, transparency. And in fact, it did none of those. There was testimony at our budget hearing that something like 46 schools were getting less money. And if you looked at it in terms of inflation and the value of the dollar, it was closer to, I think, 65 schools that were getting less money. So much for stability. And the equity, we didn't see that either. We see that on a per pupil basis. I'm thinking of if you compare Ballew's budget with Anacostia's budget, schools that have high at-risk populations, that I think it's close to $2,000 per pupil difference in funding that those schools get. So equity doesn't carry water here in terms of their model. And then transparency, as we all know, DCPS operates with 3 different budgets, and it's every hearing we have. there's confusion at best with regard to DCPS's budgeting. We have a bill pending, Bill 24-570, that it doesn't fix all the schools in terms of what they need, but it does ensure stability going forward, because the budget for Key this year is the budget for Key next year, plus an inflation factor. And so you don't have to worry about cuts any longer. And all you have to worry about is trying to get more money, which is completely appropriate and would be facilitated by this approach that we are going to move forward in the full council this fall. Again, the bill number is 24-570, schools first in budgeting. We're still working on some tweaks to it, but that would at least stabilize the funding for schools. And given that we added a new at-risk weight earlier this year, that will help with regard to the equity issue. Doesn't solve it, but helps with regard to that. There wasn't a question. I just wanted to note that since in your testimony, Mr. Joseph, you talked about the budget.
Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't agree more with everything that you said, and you've seen it now at Hardy. We see it at Key, and it's a serious issue. And you summarized the subjective nature of their quote unquote budget model perfectly.
Thank you. So I want to thank each of you for your testimony. A couple of you didn't give us statements, if you would, please. I'm going to talk with staff after the hearing about how we move forward, but I do expect that this resolution will go forward and come before the full council. And I remain committed to helping in any way I can with this, both the issue at Stoddard as well as the broader issue with enrollment. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to turn now to the two government witnesses, Eli Ross, who is Chief Operating Officer for the DC Public School System, DCPS, and Paul Kine, who's the Deputy Mayor for Education.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm just confirming that you can hear me.
I can hear you. Give me a second.
Okay.
I sort of have to sort my thoughts here. Mr. Ross, when you're ready. And I see Mr. Kine is here, so please proceed.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Middleton, members of the council and staff. I am Eli Ross, Chief Operating Officer for DC Public Schools. And on behalf of Mayor Bowser, I am honored to testify before you today on PR 24-814, the sense of the council on the Stoddard Elementary Addition Resolution of 2022. I am also pleased to provide testimony on Ward 3 school enrollment and planning more broadly. The purpose of the Stoddard resolution, amongst other things, is to declare the sense of the council that DCPS should work to ensure that the commuting patterns among Stoddard families are not disrupted and the addition of the new elementary school in the feeder pattern. DCPS appreciates the council's commitment, which we share, to alleviating the long-standing overcrowding in the Jackson Reed feeder pattern. We also appreciate council's recognition that in February 2019, DCPS's Wilson Feeder Pattern Community Working Group recommended that DCPS alleviate overcrowding by expanding physical capacity by acquiring new facilities and modernizing where possible. Mayor Bowser's acquisition of the MacArthur building and the construction of the new Foxhall Elementary School reflect these recommendations. DCPS is proactively planning for expected changes in population and school enrollment figures. Plans for an elementary school at the Foxhall site, which were informed by the Foxhall and MacArthur Community Working Group, are based on school year 2028-29 enrollment projections in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education's 2018 Master Facility Plan and 2019 Supplement. Based on those enrollment projections, significant increased capacity is needed to ensure these schools can maintain 90% building utilization. Using those school year 28-29 projections, DCPS determined that Key Elementary School would be over-enrolled by 145 students, and Stoddard Elementary would be over-enrolled by 142 students, even after their planned addition to achieve a building capacity of 523. These projections were developed by DME in 2018 and 2019 using population forecasts from the DC Office of Planning, which predicted continued population increases. Since the 2018 Master Facility Plan and the 2019 Supplement, we know that trends have shifted. Specifically, we know that population growth slowed at the end of the decade, and the pandemic had further negative impacts on enrollment. DME will update school year 28-29 enrollment projections as a part of the Master Facility Plan 2023 refresh. As you are aware, DME will conduct a school boundaries and student assignment policy study in 2023 that will take the Foxhall Elementary School boundary into account. As previously noted, the boundary study will take travel times into consideration when adjusting or creating any new school boundaries. Notably, however, the language in the resolution of not allowing for a longer commute time is vague and may be overly restrictive and unfeasible. As the boundary process will look at boundaries and student assignments citywide, we do not recommend prescribing solutions ahead of that process or legislating requirements for one catchment area of the city. Additionally, DCPS and our partners at DGS have committed to building the addition at Stoddard Elementary School to accommodate 184 more students and to do so in a way to accommodate a third floor should the need arise. Ward 3 schools have seen significant growth in enrollment over the last 10 years, largely from increased in-boundary participation and increased enrollment from feeder schools. Since 2012, enrollment has grown as follows. Stoddard Elementary School by 21% from 368 in school year 12-13 to 445 in school year 21-22. Mann Elementary School by 28% from 286 in school year 12-13 to 366 in school year 21-22. Deal Middle School by 20% from 1,165 in school year 12-13 to 1,396 in school year 21-22. Hardy Middle School by 31% from 404 in school year 12-13 to 531 in school year 21-22. And lastly, Jackson Reed High School by 30% from 1,713 in school year 12-13 to 2,062 in school year 21-22. Stoddard's enrollment also continues to rise, and based on the enrollment projections we have currently from DME, even with the planned building addition, the new Foxhall School will still be needed. Stoddard's current capacity is 339, and the current addition will be able to accommodate 184 more students for a total permanent capacity of 523. Projected enrollment for the area based on school year 28-29 projections is 554. A new school building allows DCPS to accommodate the growth in Ward 3 rather than waiting for enrollment to exceed space. The Foxhall School building will accommodate 484 students, and projected enrollment is currently 450 students. The goal of Foxhall is to help address overcrowding and maintain DCPS's efforts to keep class sizes to a minimum to align with our negotiated teacher collective bargaining agreement and to enhance classroom learning with smaller teacher-to-student ratios. In closing, DCPS is confident in our long-term planning to alleviate overcrowding in the Jackson Reed feeder pattern, and we are committed to our principles of equity for all students and families. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am happy to answer any and all questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Kine.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the Committee of the Whole, staff, and members of the public. My name is Paul Kine, and I'm honored to serve as the Deputy Mayor for Education for the District of Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's public hearing on PR 24-814, the sense of the Council on the Stoddard Elementary Addition Resolution of 2022. Comprehensive and citywide public school planning is one of the DME's core functions. Our team works hard to ensure that decisions around public school openings, expansions, replications, and closures are data-driven and in the best interests of our residents and our city. Our planning and analysis work is designed to provide key facts, increase transparency for the public, and equip leaders with strong data and analytic tools to drive decision-making. DME makes publicly available key education data and trends in DC through multiple avenues, including our EdSite and Edscape analyses, and our master facility plan reports and supplements. To date, DME has released 25 EdSites, providing easy to understand information on some of our education system's most pressing issues, including enrollment trends and school facilities. Edscape is our foundational information, updated annually, providing interactive visualizations and downloadable data sets on facilities, school quality, and student demand to inform school planning. These publications are all available on the DME website. In decisions about new schools and program expansions, we look at a number of factors included in Edscape, including population and birth trends, feeder enrollment, capture rates, school quality, school programming, capacity, utilization, housing development impacts, and the systemic consequences of the decisions. We consistently collect and review data and trends and adapt based on changing conditions. And we revisit our decisions as new information emerges and based on community input. For nearly a decade, DME and our partners at DCPS have analyzed data, engaged community members, and developed solutions for growing enrollment and overcrowding in Ward 3, specifically in the Jackson-Reed feeder pattern. In 2021, following several years of community engagement, the district purchased the former Georgetown Day School in order to establish MacArthur High School, scheduled to open in school year 23-24. This school seeks to relieve overcrowding at Jackson-Reed High School, which remained over capacity even in the pandemic, and to provide another high-quality secondary option for district students. The new MacArthur School will act as the high school feeder school for students from Hardy Middle School, whose enrollment continues to rise. At the elementary level, to address the projected overcrowding at Key, Man, and Stoddard, the district committed to building a new elementary school, Foxhall Elementary School, scheduled to open in school year 25-26. At the same time, we expanded capacity at Key, Stoddard, and Hyde-Addison elementary schools. We recognize that the enrollment picture has shifted due to the pandemic and trends in birth rates, and we will continue to closely review enrollment projections once the detailed census data is released this coming spring and Office of Planning forecasts are released thereafter. The Master Facilities Plan and the Boundary Study, important studies the DME is leading in the coming year, provide key opportunities to evaluate school capacity and need across the city, and specifically in the Jackson-Reed feeder pattern and its southern section in particular. As we conduct this work and our ongoing citywide planning and analysis, we will continue our commitment to data-driven decision-making based on the best available fact base and analysis, as well as incorporation of input from impacted communities. The MFP and boundary study will also provide us ample opportunities for community engagement. Thank you, Chairman, for your engagement on this issue, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. One of you, maybe this is Mr. Kine, what does Stoddard's enrollment look like? That would be maybe the last couple of years into the future?
Yeah, so currently, as of last school year 21-22, it was 445 students. The year before that, it was 428. And that was a decline from the peak of its enrollment historically in 1920 of 494.
2020 meaning 2020-21 or 2019-2020?
I'll just repeat that in chronological order, Chairman, to be clear. So in school year 1920, it was 494. In school year 2021, it was 428. And in school year 21-22, it was 445.
And can you tell me what the projection is for this year? Recognizing that the count is next month or next week?
Yeah, so we'll do the count, I'm looking for the projection on my table here. I don't see it exactly to hand. We'll get that for you in just a moment, Chairman, unless Eli, you've got it.
We're expecting an enrollment figure closer to 500, Mr. Chairman.
The Foxhall School is projected to have 450 students.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
And do you have an itemization where that's drawn from? Like 100 from Stoddard, 100 from Mann, 100 from Key. I realize it doesn't add up to 450. Do you have that breakdown?
I do not have that breakdown, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kine, in coming up with the 450 for Foxhall, wasn't there a calculation based on each school it was going to draw from?
Yes, there was, Chairman. There was generally we were working off the school year 28-29 projections. And we looked at the overcapacity that we thought we would see at Key, Mann, and Stoddard. Key, we projected to be 128% utilization. Mann, we expected to be 112%, and Stoddard, we expected to be 180% of utilization. And we basically—
Did you say 180 or 18?
18, it was actually 181%.
That was it, man.
And then we looked at the numbers of students that we thought could not be accommodated in those buildings. And that got us to the number of around 450.
And do you have that what those numbers were at each school?
I've got the projected total enrollment, and I've got the programmatic capacity. Yes, do you want me to just read those off to you, or?
Yes.
Would you like? Okay, so the Key programmatic capacity was 382. And the projection for 28-29 of the enrollment was 489.
So it would be fair to say that that's 107 from Key?
Correct. The Mann projected capacity was 428. And the projected enrollment for 28-21 was 480.
So that equals, gosh, you're testing me here, 52.
52, that's right. And then the Stoddard future programmatic capacity was at that time projected to be 339. And the total enrollment we expected at Stoddard was 613. So that gets to—
That's 174.
It's 274, Chairman.
Yes.
So that number is 433 if you add those up. And that, by the way, gets you at just one other note here, which I'm sure Mr. Ross would have me make. That gets you at 100% utilization across those three schools. And as was noted in one of the testimonies, DCPS likes to have a utilization of around 90% for its elementary schools. So we took that into account as well. Mr. Ross, what would you add to what I've just shared? Is that all accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. I would also reinforce our goal is 90% on elementary schools, 85% for our secondary schools.
Okay. So kind of key to this is that the Stoddard catchment area, some of it would have to cross Glover Archibald Park. Correct?
That is correct.
Now, maybe I have to go back out there and look at the park, but the last time I was in the park, that's a formidable geographic barrier. I don't think you guys agree with me on that, but I think that's a formidable geographic barrier. If I remember correctly, Glover Park is bounded on the west by Glover Archwell Park, which is fairly wide, maybe a half-mile wide, with a ravine and heavily wooded. And then there is on the south side of Glover Park, Whitehaven Parkway, which is also heavily wooded. Disagree with me if any of you can, but so students would have to, or their families would have to basically go east to Tunlaw or 37th and go down that to what, Reservoir? And then go west. Anybody disagree with me?
No, I think that's right. I think you're using 37th. You're coming around the other way down Wisconsin. And I agree that this, as DCPS pointed out in its community engagement, with various community members last year, this would potentially increase the distance for some families if they were coming from the Stoddard boundary. I'll just say, Chairman, something I think you're aware of, which we're very committed to, and I just want to make sure that some of the folks who testified today understand this. My office is going to be conducting the detailed boundary study, which will take a look at all of these factors, particularly around this neighborhood and for this new school, because no boundary has been determined. I know DCPS put out an example of what the boundary could look like, which has created some concerns in the community. And our office, my office, will be looking in a very detailed way at the kinds of mobility patterns that you're describing as we look to determine what is the best boundary, which of course we will do in consultation with the community.
Well, I think community consultation is important, and maybe somebody can be more creative than I am, but I have to say that I think that it's a problem. It's a problem. Glover Park, which is a very nice community, is in a sense landlocked on two sides, and there's the two sides that you need to get through to get to the new Foxhall Hardy School. I don't see any way around that. Maybe somebody could tell me, although I think the community is not really thinking of trying to figure out how to get through the park. But I just don't see that. And I hope I'm conveying here that I think this is more of a barrier than I think our city's education officials have been willing to admit. Mr. Ross, in your testimony, you said, DCPS and our partners at DGS have committed to building the addition at Stoddard Elementary School to accommodate 184 more students. Does that include structurally allowing a further addition?
That number does not include that number. And so that if we added a third floor, that number would go up.
Is that consistent with what the council articulated when it adopted the budget?
I believe that it is, yes.
There was a witness who testified that the RFP does not include that structural accommodation.
Yes, I did hear that, and that was news to me. So while we were getting to my testimony, I asked the team to look into that, and the witness's testimony was accurate. And I'm obviously not happy with that, but I agree with you that the capital budget book is controlling. And I'll be looking to work with our DGS partners to find something that can articulate our commitment to the capital budget book and as well as to that RFP that should have included that third floor.
So how do I get that assurance in writing? What do you propose?
What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is connect with my partners at DGS, see what they think is feasible and the best methodology to do that, and follow up with you very quickly.
Okay. In the end, I'm hopeful that there'll be, since the RFP is a written document, I'm hopeful there'll be something in writing that results from this. But I appreciate what you're offering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Give me a second here. Give me just a second. Deputy Mayor Kine, the Policy Center put out a paper this summer that public school enrollment has plateaued. In early grades, it's falling, saying that the future bodes for less enrollment. I think that the planning that you did, I put it past tense, 2018, 2019, had growing enrollment. What I want to say, a trend of increasing enrollment. The Policy Center says, if I read this correctly, it's plateaued and it's beginning to fall. Do you have a reaction to? I assume you're familiar with either that or that kind of speculation. What can you tell me? Or what's your response? Or enlighten me.
So first of all, thank you for the very, very important question. It's the kind of data that we look at on a continuous basis. And the Policy Center's study speculates forward based on declining birth rates nationally. And it then suggests that birth rates are positively correlated with kindergarten enrollment. And it suggests that if your birth rates decline, you will ultimately have lower public school enrollment, which has a certain logic to it. So we agree with the logic. And in fact, my office produced an EdSite which looked at birth rates compared to the lagging kindergarten enrollment. And we also saw for DC specifically that kind of correlation. So we absolutely agree with the logic. We don't yet know for DC what that trend looks like going forward. We don't know what mobility into the city might look like. We certainly have seen a lot of population growth here, which has affected that number. So we're not sure how this is going to play out. The Office of Planning, as you probably know, Chairman, does population forecasts for us based off census data. The last year in which they did that was 2016. So those are the numbers that we have been basing our forecasts on. We're very fortunate at this moment because the census has just come out with new numbers and the Office of Planning is working with them and will deliver to all of us, including my office and my team in the spring, new population forecasts, which I think will give us a very good idea of what the future population of our city will be, but also importantly, what our future public school enrollment will be.
So to repeat back what I heard, you're aware of the Policy Center's analysis. You think it may not completely apply to the district, but certainly there's a question that the enrollment trends, or rather growth trends, and therefore enrollment trends may have changed, and that's what you're going to be looking at.
That's accurate. Yep, that's right. That's right, Chairman.
Now, I do have a one-pager in front of me from the Policy Center. Births in DC have been decreasing since 2016 and will likely continue to fall as the pandemic changes population dynamics. Fewer births, fewer births after peaking in 2016. Residents of childbearing age leaving since 2015. DC women having fewer children. since 2008. So I think they were pretty DC specific. It doesn't alter your conclusion, which is this is something you're looking at and you're going to be looking at with Office of Planning.
Yes. And again, the logic holds, but I do think there is an unknown variable here, which is what has the impact of the pandemic been? In the first full year of schooling in the pandemic, we did see the public school enrollment go down. In the second full year of the pandemic, we actually saw it tick a little bit back up. And then, we'll have our new numbers in the coming weeks for this year. But preliminary numbers suggest that they're not going down.
So let me shift. I want to talk a little bit about MacArthur. I don't have those facts front and center in front of me, but my recollection is that you're looking for a capacity of 1,000 and that you estimate based on these figures from 2018 or earlier, about 800 students in school year 26-27. And I think of those 800, something like 700 would come from Hardy or the Jackson Reed catchment area. Am I right?
Deputy Mayor, I'll jump in and take the first answer of this. Mr. Chairman, the goal is an enrollment of 800 with a capacity of 1,000, and the boundary for MacArthur would mirror Hardy. So Hardy students would ultimately be matriculating at MacArthur High School.
But Hardy right now has like 600 some students. So, and that's spread among 3 grades. I can't remember my middle schools. So that can't be enough to get you to 800 at MacArthur.
The intention is for a phase-in over a multiple number of years, beginning in school year 22-23, where we're looking at bringing in 9th graders, potentially a small 10th grade class, and we anticipate making that decision at some point in the very near future. As we move forward, we do think that enrollment number will increase as we bring in students in the subsequent grades, 10, 11, and 12.
So of the 800, how many are coming from Hardy?
We don't know those exact numbers yet. It's a good question as we get ready for building out our projections in December, as well as the lottery process that begins in January. We think we'll have a clearer number on what we can expect that number to look like specifically coming from Hardy. But again, we're committed to deep community engagement with our Hardy parents. We had a community meeting last night to discuss this process as well. But I think, our intention is we want Hardy students to be going to MacArthur. Ultimately, that's the goal. But we are going to engage with them and give them as many opportunities right now for options.
And Chairman, I can offer an additional set of numbers if it's helpful.
Yes.
So in the most recent school year, Jackson Reed saw 90 freshmen who had come directly from Hardy. It also saw an additional 30 freshmen who lived within the Hardy catchment area. So that's 120 9th grade students at Jackson Reed that came from Hardy or its catchment area. And the idea is that over time, as those students matriculate up, you end up with something close to 400 or 500 students from Hardy who would end up in the MacArthur school.
Well, 4 years would be 480.
That's right.
Okay, with a goal of 800 for MacArthur. So where does the other 320 come from?
The other idea that DCPS has is, of course, you've got some feeder rights from Oyster Adams Middle School that goes to Jackson Reed. So you would offer those families an option, and you would have some current Jackson Reed families that potentially could be given an option as well. And again, all of these things are yet to be determined in the boundary and feeder study that we'll do in partnership with DCPS next year.
Well, this is a concern, and I'm saying this not to come across as berating or preaching, but just to put out what my thinking is. And I think some of you know this already. I fully supported, and my recollection was that when we had the budget before us a couple of years ago, that's when the GDS school went on the market, and I fully supported, worked with you to get money in the budget, which was sort of last minute, so that we could acquire that site. And I have no regrets about it. And I think that it makes sense that MacArthur can take pressure off of Jackson Reed. But my concern here is that if it creates more seats than come from Jackson Reed, we are just creating more capacity, high school capacity, that's going to either suck from other high schools in the city or be empty. And we don't need that. I was looking at something earlier today. Let me see if I can find it. It's going to take me a second. This is as of 3 years ago. Give me a second here. I'm trying to find what I want to read. The 2014 adequacy study contracted by the DME took an in-depth look at the uniform per student funding formula. The report authors estimated that a small high school was 400 students. As of about 3 years ago, 6 out of the 18 DCPS high schools were under that enrollment threshold. And there was another DCPS high school that had under 475 students. So what does that work out to? 7 DCPS high schools were small. And then another analysis, including, I believe this includes charter schools, 5,277 unfilled seats in high schools. I could go on, but I think you know the concern, which is that we don't need to be building more high school seats, although we do want to take pressure off of Jackson Reed. So if we get to 500 and the goal was 500 students and the goal is 800, we got 300 seats that are either going to be empty or draw from other schools. And so when the budget was before us this year, and I think you know this, Mr. Kine, I altered what the mayor had proposed with regard to capital funding for MacArthur so that there was available what was needed to open the school, which if I remember correctly, it will open with a capacity of around 500 and then delays the additional capacity so that we can work this out. I'm pausing because I think there was one other thought. I was also more than happy to support putting money in the budget. I think it was a year before that for the new Foxhall Hardy School, and I don't regret that either, because we need to be looking at capacity. But I still see a lot of problems with that, and I think that's why I believe I delayed the funding for the new school by about a year, so that we have time to work through this. But I'm not interested in more empty seats. And I'm not sure there's more for me to say than that.
Chairman, if I may make one comment, I first
Please.
have to say that I certainly agree with some of the concerns that you raised. And in fact, some of the analysis you're quoting, I am sure came directly out of my office. We look at utilization numbers and capacities, and we have flagged on a number of occasions very publicly similar concerns to the one you've raised, not only about small schools, but also about the systemic consequences of opening new schools. That's why I am very excited about the work that we're going to be doing together over the course of next year on the boundary and feeder patterns. And in particular, just to remind ourselves, the MacArthur School is being created to alleviate overcrowding in the Jackson-Reed feeder pattern in the first instance and most importantly. And I think the 800 number we could think of as an up to 800 number. I think it is a number that gives you lots of programmatic options. At the same time, we want to ensure across our system that we're striking the right balance, which we fully intend to do. So we will be happy to work with the community, with the city, with LEAs, with the council over the course of the next year to figure out how we can ensure we're solving problems, but not in a way that creates unintended consequences.
Appreciate that. Give me a second here. This is sort of changing the subject, but it's relevant to enrollment and overcapacity. The former Intelsat building that was where the Whittle School was, there's been some talk about looking at acquiring that space. I'm sure you've looked at that, Mr. Kine. I don't know if you have, Mr. Ross, but I'd like to know what your thinking is with regard to that site. Mr. Ross, I'll pick on you first.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. No, I have not myself looked at that site, but following this hearing, I'll connect with my partners at DGS as well as the deputy mayor and see if there's an opportunity for us to take a look at that site.
Okay, Mr. Kine, I'm pretty sure you've went on a tour there, I think.
I haven't been on the tour, but President Mason went on the tour. I know members of your staff, Chairman, have gone, and someone from the executive also has toured. I've engaged in preliminary discussions with the leaseholders. My comment about that space is that it's an extremely complicated financial arrangement currently, where there is a portfolio leaseholder, which is my understanding is that they're in some kind of default. The landowner is the federal government. There's a multiple year lease currently in place of in excess of 100 years. And so our early view of that site is that it may be overly complicated and too expensive for us to engage in. That said, we continue to look at it. And as I've shared with you, UDC has expressed some potential interest. DCPS clearly is interested in sites that could help work on the problem of too many students attending its current schools in that feeder pattern. And so we remain interested, but we have not resolved on an answer yet, given the complexity of it.
Deputy Mayor Kine, the ed site you were referring to on enrollment, is that from May of this year? After years of growth, births across DC have been declining since 2016?
That is the ed site I was referring to. Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Let me just check with staff, see if there are any other questions. I'm out of questions. I want to thank each of you. I'm trying to remember if there was any follow-up, Mr. Ross. I think there was something you're going to get back on.
Yes, I'm going to connect with my partners at DGS about the Stoddard amendment to the RFP to see what type of commitment we can articulate publicly that will give you and the members of the public some confidence in our plan.
Great. And Mr. Kine, I think you're off the hook in terms of follow-up.
I'm just continuing to work on preparing for these important studies, Chairman, which we'll look forward to doing in collaboration with many partners across the city.
Yes. All right. Thank you all very much. The This has been a hearing on PR 24-814, sense of the council on the Stoddard Elementary Edition Resolution 2022, and also overcrowding and enrollment in Ward 3 DCPS schools generally. The record in this matter is open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 11th. The time is now 3:33 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.